In the name of capacity development, we are doing very passive, standard things which don't make change happen, right? It's training or technical assistance, they have their role. But capacity development should be about developing the capacity, the collective change capacity of society to achieve higher levels of development outcome. That's not a technocratic issue. That's a change management issue. It's a very dynamic, exciting, inspirational issue. That means you build the capacity of not just government, but civil society, parliaments, media. You empower citizens to give feedback. You enable these stakeholders to work together, cooperatively, to overcome entrenched networks of corruption, that don't want to change the status quo. It's a very dynamic agenda of connecting south to south, south to north, crowdsourcing, taking knowledge, wholesaling it through technology, through e-learning. These are very exciting dimensions of capacity development. And that's not what you think of when you think of capacity development. So we have a huge amount we can do with this agenda going forward, but turn it into a more dynamic instrument for achieving development results. The world has changed a lot in the last few years. Just to name a couple of things, there's been the rise of the middle income countries, going from G8 to G20. From a capacity development perspective, these countries represent sources of development knowledge. So you can replace the north-south transfer of reform prescriptions with south-south exchanges. The other thing from Tahrir Square in Egypt to Anna Hazare movement in India, there's been a rise of citizen power. Citizens want accountability. So the old paradigm of working just with civil servants or just with government has to change to working with multiple stakeholders. Because of all of this, a newer approach to capacity development is needed. And what is that newer approach? A newer approach is we need to support country-led development. We need to not first begin with what money we are going to transfer. We need to first begin with who are the stakeholders, change agents in the country, how we can build their collective capacity to make change happen, which means working with government and non-governmental actors to have collaborative action, which means inspiring them by connecting them to successful development experience, which is often in the South now, so South-South exchanges. And it also means injecting much greater transparency in aid processes that support this development. Knowledge exchange today has become a very powerful instrument for capacity development. And why is that so? Practitioners and policymakers want to know what has worked elsewhere. And rather than hearing it from the World Bank or from a consultant coming from the North, if they can learn about it from their peers, right? So recently, to give you a concrete example, Nigeria wanted to learn how to tap into the global IT industry, which is massive business. It didn't go to the North, it went to India, because India has become such a big player in this. When engineers from the Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, wanted to learn how to maintain roads in difficult terrain, they went to China. This area of knowledge exchange has become powerful because these countries find that when they learn from peers, it builds inspiration, it gives them practical knowledge. And the middle income countries want to share knowledge. So some countries want to know, some countries want to share. And we are playing a role of connecting the demand and supply of knowledge that builds inspiration. That's in terms of knowledge exchange and how important it is for capacity development. The other question you asked had to do with technology. Technology plays a very important role in knowledge exchange because you can learn from each other through video technology. Today you can crowdsource innovative solutions to challenges you're wrestling with through a competition platform that we have piloted. So technology can play a very vital role in knowledge exchange, but the other very powerful dimension of technology is in building capacity of citizens to give feedback. When we think of capacity development, we usually think of government, or sometimes we think of civil society, but we've never thought of citizens. But when citizens have mobile phones, today in developing countries, there are 4.6 billion mobile phones. 70% of adults in developing countries have mobile phones, including the very poorest. They can give SMS feedback on whether the teachers are showing up to school or whether textbook, and this is not theory. We have supported a civil society organization called ANSA East Asia, and they have put in a website called checkmyschool.org in the Philippines, where parents, students, and community volunteers can send SMS feedback if teachers are not showing up to school or if textbooks are not being delivered. And we are looking to scale up these kinds of ICT-enabled citizen feedback in other projects in other parts of the world. A strategic dimension of capacity building is we need to achieve development results, and that requires change agents who are inspired, knowledgeable, connected to make that change happen. So it moves from being a passive agenda to a dynamic agenda of change, which means that you now think about who are the drivers of change, right? And which may mean a civil society group, a parliamentary group, or typically now coalitions between reformers in government and civil society. So it gives a strategic dimension to change, and it gives a strategic dimension to knowledge exchange as a critical part of that process. We developed a mechanism with partners called geomapping, or mapping for results. And what we do is we geocode all the projects. So we've geocoded the entire World Bank project portfolio. That's 30,000 projects, right? And what it means is on a map of, let's say, Bolivia, you can locate where the project is concentrated in Bolivia. That's step one. Step two is you can then mesh up that particular map with the indicators it was trying to assess. So if you think of a map of Bolivia, you see dots corresponding to all World Bank projects, and then you can shade that map where poverty is the greatest, or where dropouts are the greatest. And you can see, are the projects going where the problems are the greatest. And now we are trying to map all of donor projects, because from a citizen perspective, they don't care whether it's a World Bank project or an EC project or a DFID project. So with this, you have much greater transparency about the results, and citizens can now give feedback, again through SMS technology, as to whether that project is delivering the resources. Now this applies to investment lending projects, right? To projects where there's a location. But what about budget support? Budget support you can't geolocate on a particular map. And that's where we've developed another method called a boost technology, where you can look at the treasury flows, public expenditure, and you can geolocate which districts it is going to, let's say in Uganda, and you can mash it up with the efficiency of that expenditure. So you can see for the first time where is the budget going and what's the expenditure efficiency of that budget. So modern technology can introduce transparency for results in ways that we couldn't think of earlier.